soil migration through the areas where no other vegetation takes place. So next slide, please. The survey of the types of knotweed that we have was conducted by Eric Burkhart from Penn State University, and there are 3 types of knotweed: giant knotweed, Japanese knotweed, which is basically what we refer to all the knotweed as, and Bohemian knotweed, which is a hybrid of the 2. And then they cross and they recross, and there are all kinds of variations. Initial report from Eric is that he thinks, and some others who have been involved in that, like Jessica Newbern from the Park Service, think that the primary species in distribution throughout the upper Delaware watershed is the hybrid, the cross between the giant and the Japanese. We've identified some giant, we've identified some Japanese, but they are in very small proportion to the hybrid. And the hybrid makes very few seeds. It mainly reproduces through rhizome fragments that are washed down in high water. And then it colonizes. So when you see a stand of knotweed, that may be all a clone of a thumbnail-sized fragment of rhizome that established 15 or 20 years ago. And hybrid has what is often called hybrid vigor. So it's trying to establish itself, and it does a really good job of it. It outcompetes everything. Slide, please. The mapping and determining the extent of the knotweed was done by Shippensburg University based on 5 aerial flights we did, taking hundreds of thousands of photographs in the visible and infrared range of the upper river. And Shippensburg took all of that data and trained their highly sophisticated computers through AI and other means to identify visually from at the pixel level what it thought was knotweed and what it was not knotweed. Next slide, please. They've completed that work and they're working on their final analysis. Here is an example of a map that the computer generated where it decided that certain vegetation that it could see was knotweed and certain vegetation was not. And so many of you are familiar with this. This is kind of centered on the Gales property, but it is the junction of the East Branch, the West Branch. There's a little point at the top, that's Point Mountain property. The right side of the photo is the sewage treatment plant and the junction, and left side is Gales property and 191. And wherever you see this kind of turquoise, bluish color, that's where the computer thought there was knotweed. And the other categories there in the legend are maybe knotweed, maybe not knotweed, maybe mistaken for knotweed. And interestingly enough, the computer did a great job on this. It took a lot of work, but what we were asked to do by Shippensburg was to go out in the field and see where the computer was right and where the computer was wrong. So next slide, please. We did validation. Shippensburg designed a little smartphone app where we could go out and GPS locate exactly what we saw in the field, and I guess the legend isn't showing up on this, but one of the problems with the method that we used is that the computer can't see from the visual images knotweed that might exist under the canopy, under the tree canopy, because the tree canopy is shading out that visual image from above. So a lot of these crosses were saying the computer didn't see knotweed, but in the field we see that it's there under the canopy. Some of them are false positives. I think the X's are false positives. And the green, the solid green squares are where the computer set was absolutely correct. So we went out and did field validation, and now they're finishing up their analysis. I think the preliminary and the stretches that we mapped were fairly limited. They were kind of above and below each of our 3 demonstration sites, probably totaling about 5 miles of river. And depending on which stretch it was, Deposit, Hancock, or Skinner's Falls, they've determined that there's between 5 and I think 28% of the active river area colonized by knotweed. Next slide, please. So taking that information and then doing a lot more field work, we were interested in whether or not soils are migrating from knotweed stands. So Melinda Daniels from Stroud Water Resource Center was here for 2 field visits during the summer and went out and looked at soil composition and depth in knotweed, and same in existing native riparian vegetation, which is harder and harder to find. It's hard to find good stands of native riparian vegetation because there's so much knotweed. And again, she's in the middle of wrapping up her report. They have to dry out in autoclaves all of hundreds of samples that she took and do analysis. I think she has some minions helping her, but it's a lot of work, and we're looking forward to her report very soon. Next slide, please. These are just some examples of what a native riparian vegetation should look like. There should be grasses and shrubs and bushes and trees and all kinds of stuff coming up, and we've lost that along the river. Next slide, please. This is an example where the knotweed doesn't grow right down to the water. It doesn't like its roots wet, but it will, and sometimes it looks like it is, but it's really just overhanging. So here's an example where there's enough area that is low enough that the knotweed doesn't grow on the right next to the river, and then the knotweed establishes, and where there's high water, you can see that there's no other vegetation to keep the soils in place. And next slide, please. And what happens is that it just washes away, and all you are left with is cobble and gravel. Next slide, please. So I'm nuts. Oh, there, keep going. There you go. Okay. So so in addition to the research, we established 3 sites: Hancock, Skinner's Falls, and Deposit. Hancock was kind of a demonstration site where we had an event and we showed different things. We brought the goats in, we showed mechanical cutting, showed the effects of injection, but we didn't treat them fully throughout the year. Deposit and Skinner's Falls were full year demonstrations where each technique was taken to throughout the scope of the project, with 2 forms of herbicide treatment and goat foraging and covering and repeated mechanical cutting, and we've examined the outcomes of the sites, and they're very interesting. We've learned a lot from this, and we think that people that have visited the sites have learned a lot as well. One proviso is this was originally designed as a 2-year on-the-ground demonstration because no treatment is going to be completely effective in 1 year, and all treatments will require multiple years of follow-up. I just heard from Nancy, who's on the call, that the Tinicum project, which is one of the few landscape scale projects with involvement of a lot of partners and people in Pennsylvania on the Delaware, in the Delaware watershed, happened 20 years ago. Volunteers have continued to go out and try to treat the knotweed that they started dealing with 20 years ago. And in some cases, like the volunteers have aged out, or other things have happened, and knotweed just requires repeated attention. Please. There's a picture of some goats eating knotweed. We were very excited about this. It's a great media opportunity. People love their goats, and we had heard that they like knotweed. But I'll get to that in a sec. Next slide, please. So, again, the goal of this was to get landowners to take some interest, and from the start we said, we're not taking we don't have an opinion about which of these techniques you should adopt. Each of them have their own upsides and downsides, costs and levels of effort, but we want to give you all the different choices. And we're very honest. Eradication is difficult. Containment is feasible, and at least from my perspective, the most successful outcome is where you can foster succession and competition, so that native riparian vegetation can compete and reestablish, or at least try to maintain presence on the river to keep the soils in place. Slide, please. So this is the Skinner's Falls demonstration site. This is what it looked like before we did anything. And those are the plots that were originally laid out. The top plot was changed a little bit to keep the membrane out of high water, but that was the original concept. Next slide, please. So this was a recent photograph of the Skinner's Falls site. You can see these various strips from the air. We have other pictures, but on the left is our covering site where Owens Corning donated some very high quality industrial strength membrane, geotextile membrane that we used and installed on the site. Didn't want to take it all the way down to the river because, like in the December flood, river at Lordville, for example, the gauge got up to 60,000 cubic feet per second as compared to today it's at 3,000 cubic feet per second. It got up to about where the membrane ends. So we didn't want it underflowing water in high water. And I had hoped that the knotweed that is between the membrane and the river would be mechanically cut, but it never happened. So, but the interpretive rangers that spend the summer at the site were very happy with what we were able to do. It allowed them to see the river more, allowed people to come down the river and see the landing from a distance, because before it was just a big pile of knotweed and no one kind of knew where the landing was or the path was. The next plot up from the membrane was the foliar spraying. Is the foliar spraying site where knotweed is cut down in July, June, and so that when they go in to spray, it's not over their heads. And then they followed up with 2 sprayings in August, and then the 20th of September was the last one. One that looks the brownish was the plot next to that. That was the injection plot, where they went and they injected each of the stems with herbicide, and then followed that up with foliar spraying when they did the foliar spraying with the other site. And next to that is mechanical cutting, and next to that is the goats. So next slide, please. What we saw from the outcomes of the treatments is that with 3 mechanical cuttings, we were able to eliminate flowering and seed production. We were able to see a few native riparian species coming up amongst the knotweed, even in these very dense stands. Saw sumac and sycamore seedlings and various mustards and some grasses. But in the mechanical cutting method, you need to continue to selectively cut each year in order to allow the competition, or in some cases, if all you want is lawn, you can just immediately mow it if the conditions manage, and eventually eliminate the knotweed. The covering with the geotextile membrane, we found that the membrane that Owens Corning supplied was very strong. There were no problems with knotweed coming up through it. Those of you familiar with knotweed know that when it first comes up, it is like this very thick, spiky, emerging shoot, and many people have tried to cover it with Home Depot big box tarps, and it may hold it, but they tend to degrade pretty rapidly, and knotweed can come up right through it. So this stuff was really good. It again needs to be down for more than 1 year in order to eradicate the rhizomes underneath. It is impermeable, so they won't get any water or light or air. But there are also, in most cases, knotweed established around the edges of this membrane. So it does present a challenge. We have asked each of the site owners to keep the membrane in place for an additional year, at least, and I think they're all going to agree to that. We're also experimenting with some succession planting at Skinner's Falls, where one of the membranes will be pierced or slit, and willows or other fast-growing riparian vegetation will be planted in it to give it a heads up over the knotweed in case it's still there or growing from adjacent areas. And after it establishes, then the membrane will be cut away. And this is a new technique that we don't know that it's been done anywhere, and it was something proposed by friends at Penn State. So we're very interested in seeing what happens. Please. The herbicide foliar application had good coverage on all the plots. Again, it looks like it did its work, but the outcomes won't be known till next year when we see what comes up, and we fully expect that a successful foliar application might require more than 1 year of work. Herbicide injection. Next slide, please, Molly. Herbicide injection. We also we also saw that there were differential outcomes. We had very good coverage on the deposit plot. The plotted deposit we selected had multiple other types of vegetation growing along with the knotweed, so it was a good chance to see whether the injection just targeted the knotweed and not the other vegetation. And so, and it also wasn't quite as densely growing as in the Skinner's Falls plot. So it was a very effective thing at deposit. At Skinner's Falls, the plot had less other vegetation, was very dense, and the invasive species management company, they apply for their permit, has very limited amount of product that they can use according to the regulations, and they found that they were only able to inject or treat 1/3 of the plot, which was much bigger at Skinner's. They were able to do a follow-up folio treatment for the whole thing, so we'll see what the outcomes are. But I think the lesson there is injection, which is very difficult and expensive and time-consuming, is great when it's kind of a mixed bag of vegetation, but if it's an intense, very densely planted colony, probably injection is not good. And then finally, the goats. It turns out the goats like the leaves, not the young shoots. I thought when we brought the goats in the beginning, they would hit the emerging shoots, keep it down from the beginning, but they don't like the emerging shoots, which is the part that we actually eat. You can eat knotweed when it's like 6 to 18 inches tall, but that's before it's put out any leaves, really. They like the leaves. So next slide, please. So what we saw at the plots where the goats were there all summer was they did a pretty good job, and this is Skinner's Falls. On the left is the area up near the parking lot. The goats are very friendly. They love people. They like to hang out near the parking lot when they were there and see who was coming by. And then at the back on the right side of the plot, they also like to go and have their privacy and hang out and get some shade. They did a fairly good job there. And in the middle, we ended up with these Dr. Seussical type of plants where they trimmed off all the leaves until they couldn't reach them anymore. And there's a fringe of leaves, and in fact, these put out flowers there. So that informs us that for goats, and versus in deposit where it was a much smaller plot, it was square. It informs us that goats need to either be more goats, or that they need to be gang grazed in smaller plots, 25 by 25 feet at a time, or maybe some early cutting to make the knotweed more vegetative, more leafy, and then they can do their job. So again, we don't know what will happen next year until we see what comes up in the spring. This was partly effective and also good media. Next slide, please. So the third part of the project was not only demonstrating and doing the research, but also doing outreach in various forums. And we had over 50 households attend our 4 in-person knotweed events at the 3 sites. We did some in-person events at the Wayne County Public Library way back. And in March, I think it was the last in-person event pre-COVID that was done at the library, so early March of 2020. We did a couple of events for Upper Delaware Council. It was last fall, and had good attendance there. We had some virtual events sponsored by New York League of Conservation Voters and Fudder. Good attendance. There were a bunch of newspaper articles and radio shows, and we've done a follow-up survey and found that from our respondents, people learned new information, and the project changed their outlook and approach to knotweed. So next slide is just a listing of all the partners and people. Whoops, doesn't look right, but that's okay. You get a good sense of all the different people that were involved in the project, and everyone from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Congress, which appropriated the money, down to the Coshecton Mills, which the The membrane was fabricated to our specifications by Owens Corning and their contractor, then shipped to the site on pallets. Sherry got a call from the shipper the morning before it was supposed to be delivered to Skinner's Falls, where we had arranged for it to be dropped at the neighbor's property. And the shipper said, "So where will the forklift be?" Sherry said, "Well, there's no forklift at Skinner's Falls." And they said, "Well, the pallet weighs 700 pounds, and we don't have a way to get it off the truck." So Sherry pivoted quickly, called up the Coshecton Mills, and they became part of the Knotweed project by having the truck deliver the pallet to Coshecton Mills. They got it off the truck and then brought it down to the site for us. So this project was a collaboration of many different organizations, people, and even some businesses. And we hope that it might generate some new business for people in the landscaping or excavation or other businesses that are related, where people will start asking contractors to come in and help them deal with knotweed on their property. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? We have time for questions.
Thanks, Steve. We do have a few minutes for questions, and a couple of questions came in, so I will read those. Peter Kulisar is asking, is there a worst case scenario or prediction? That is, what's anticipated in the long run, say 20 years, if no action is taken, what would the river be like?
That wasn't part of our scope, but from the maps, we could probably estimate like where knotweed can continue to colonize, and look at its kind of outlying extent. If you're interested, Peter, we could probably get you data, and that's in your wheelhouse. The soil analysis might also inform that, because as we all know, there are places where knotweed has overtaken islands, and there are places where there are islands that are knotweed free, or river banks that are knotweed free, and we don't quite know why that is right now. It may be topography, it may be river flows, it may be soil or geomorphology, and soil analysis might help us a little bit of that, but we haven't done any predictive analysis.
I mean, a sense of my question is, are we facing some kind of real disaster? How motivated should we all be about this? Is it an inconvenience, or is it a really, really ecologically serious problem for the river?
So Melinda Daniels' particular interest in this was the geomorphology of the river and the islands in the river, and I can't do her thing. We'll get her report and she'll be able to explain it better, but from her point of view, the islands are a result of natural forces, and they help maintain river health, and they change and are dynamic over time. And he was concerned that if knotweed is inhibiting the natural flows and the natural changes as evidenced in the islands, that it could result in wider, shallower rivers that are warmer and more sediment laden and things like that. So that's the concern, and that's the hypothesis. But let's wait and see what her report is, and see if it's real or if it's a minor issue.
And Peter, just to add on to that, we will, when that report is complete, we will certainly be sending it out. So we'll share as we get data. There's one more question. There are some areas along the river where there is vegetation, no trees or brush, yet there is knotweed on either side. Why is that? You would think the difference in soil composition is the reason. Has any investigation been done to answer this question?
Yeah, that's the work Melinda's doing, and she's looking at the soil depths, the soil composition, like the size of the grains, what's in it, whether it's organic or mineral. I went out with her a little bit, and we found places where not only is there no other vegetation, but there is just like 6 inches of worm castings in the knotweed, which may be a good thing and may not be a good thing. We have some concern from people about invasive worms right now. So is knotweed helping that invasion or not? We don't know the answers to these questions, but they are questions that the research was designed to begin to address.
Okay, so I think Don Hamilton put a request. He's looking for a student to follow up on this project. So if anybody knows someone, feel free to reach out to him. Thank you again, Steve. And we, like I said, will continue to share info. But right now we are going to move on to the next presentation. So next up we have Steve Swenson, who is the senior ecologist from the New York State Department of Conservation, Environmental Conservation. And he is going to talk about the work that they are doing in partnership with FUDR and TU on fiber optics technology. So take it away, Steve.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay, I think? Thank you for having me this morning. I'm going to be talking to you about applied distributed temperature sensing in cold water streams for aquatic habitat restoration. As Molly mentioned, my name is Steve Swenson. I work for the New York State DEC, Bureau of Ecosystem Health. I'm an aquatic ecologist. And we partnered with Trout Unlimited and Friends of the Upper Delaware River to conduct this. So the funding came from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Delaware Watershed Conservation Fund in 2018. The project utilizes cutting-edge fiber optic technology to pinpoint areas of cold water, groundwater recharge, which will strategically guide project implementers on the best locations to focus the restoration work in the future. The fiber optic technology can be utilized in any cold water ecosystem throughout the Delaware River watershed. It's very uncommon. USGS uses it, and the University of Colorado. There are not many folks that use it currently. So here we have a picture on the left-hand side of the actual unit in a secure box. On the top, you can see a little white box that says FTR 3000. That's the unit itself. And below it is the optical switch. And then you have the power supply to the right, which is 2 deep cycle batteries that is recharged by a solar panel. And then you have the laptop with the software program to control the device. Initially, we had just 1 power supply with 2 batteries and a solar panel, but it was not enough to run everything. So there's also a separate box aside from this with 2 additional batteries and an additional solar panel and controller for the panel. So the description here, we use fiber optic cable to locate areas of groundwater upwelling in which to focus aquatic habitat improvement. Streams currently under analysis are Kadoja Creek, Fish Creek, Laurel Creek, Mongop, and Oquaga. The need, groundwater influxes into streams provide a relatively consistent water temperature where cold water species thrive. And utilizing a DTS will help focus in-stream habitat restoration, making our work more efficient and effective at creating the best thermal relief. So we have a comparison here. Generally speaking, most folks that conduct research within any water body are going to use temperature loggers, which is on the right-hand side. As I mentioned earlier, the DTS technology is a fiber optic based system and is not commonly used. But this is the exact one that was purchased by Friends of the Upper Delaware River for our partnership project. And it was purchased from Berkshire Photonics, and it is manufactured by J Power Systems Corporation. And on the right, you have a temperature logger, a typical hobo pendant, which is typically purchased from Onset. We'll do a comparison on the two here, some pros and some cons to kind of give you an idea of what we're dealing with the DTS versus the standard loggers. The DTS Pros provide a longitudinal temperature profile of a stream reach. They can be used to create a temperature profile from 500 to 1,000 meters long, or they can be used with 3 500-meter cables to provide a longitudinal cross-sectional profile of a stream. They produce a lot of data, which is why I'm only going to talk about one project today. We're still analyzing a lot of data from previous streams here. Some cons, there is some maintenance required. They're difficult to install and require many people to install. They're extremely complicated to operate, and they're expensive. And so we'll go over to the temperature loggers. They are easy to install and can be installed by one person. They're easy to operate. They're inexpensive to purchase. And there's very little maintenance required. You can leave them in for many years, and you just swap out a battery. Some of them you can't even change a battery. They just last a certain amount of time. And then some cons, they only pick up point data. So again, we're dealing with linear data with the DTS, where the temperature logger is only point data. And the data collected by the temperature logger is insignificant compared to the DTS data. So I'm going to talk to you about one of our sites here, Kadoja Creek. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with this creek. It's on the left-hand side, you see a picture of the stream being surveyed by one of the staff at Trout Unlimited, Joanne. And then on the right, you can see a picture of 2 of our partners here, DEC and TU staff, putting the fiber out in the stream. That is one spool of 500-meter cable. So we have 3 of those. And it's important to survey the stream so that you know where the groundwater upwelling is coming from, or you know where there is warm water coming into the stream from maybe surface runoff. And you can overlay that, that cable on your survey. Some background. Kadoja Creek is a tributary to the east branch of the Delaware River. It flows 8 miles from Perkins Pond. It's historically and locally known as an important cold water refuge and spawning tributary for upper Delaware trout. It's primarily composed of 46% gravel, 49% cobble, and 4% boulder. And we used the DTS system in the summer of 2020 to investigate spatial and temporal variation in stream temperature, to locate temperature flux sources, and to identify vital restoration areas to improve cold water habitat. On the right-hand side, this is the New York 17 overpass. So I'll be talking a little bit about 2 bridges, probably in the next slide or 2. So I'll go into methods here, but first, if you take a look on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the DTS box in the upper left-hand side, and then downstream of that, the cable runs to the Delaware. You can see tributary 1 is in a yellow polygon. Then you have the New York 17 bridge and the New York 268 bridge. We ran 3 fibers, again, 500 meters long, 1 on the stream bed right, 1 in the center of the stream bed, and then 1 on the stream bed left. Data collected in June and July of 2020 in Celsius at 1 meter increments every 60 seconds. So again, you can imagine there's a lot of data that accumulates. Daily average, 4.8 degrees Celsius, and then the maximum daily temperature, 24.6 degrees Celsius. 3 target areas identified, which I pointed out in that aerial image, is the tributary 1. It's approximately 85 to 95 meters downstream. New York 17 bridge is approximately 280 meters downstream, and the New York 268 bridge, 390 meters. Some general observations would be that the temperature is driven primarily by surface water interactions. The thick alluvium layer, including hyperhelic upwelling from late Devonian shale and sandstone bedrock, is resulting from recent flooding and increased erosion. And temperature influenced by amount of solar radiation surrounding impervious surface, slope, and concentration of pools. So here we have figure 1. and it's a longitudinal elevation profile of Kadoja Creek with continuous average whole stream temperature resulting in July 13th of 2020. So I'll point out, again, we have tributary 1 on the left-hand side. You have New York 17 bridge in the center and the New York 268 bridge on the right-hand side. And what you're seeing at tributary 1 is a decrease in temperature from trib 1. And then each of the bridges, you can see the temperature goes down and then it goes up after it exits the bridge. The temperature decreased dramatically, as you can see at trib 1. And as the slope increases at the New York 17 bridge, creating higher concentration of pools, there's partial shading. There's a large pool created along the east wing wall of the New York 268 bridge and large amounts of sediment deposits at the downstream outlet. So we'll see some pictures of these in a moment. This is an aerial image of the tributary with the canopy overlaid on it. And as you wouldn't be surprised, the canopy around the stream is likely decreasing the temperature of the stream. And I think the hope is once we look at more of the data, especially Fish Creek, we did find several locations of colder water coming in. And once we analyze the data, we'll be able to figure out more detail. As far as the case study goes, I would say Fish Creek is going to be more interesting than Kadoja regarding other tributaries and subsurface water flows. So some results here in figure 2 is the average temperature profile for each fiber. And this was on July 15th of 2020. Again, you have trib 1 to the left, New York 17 bridge center, and New York 268 bridge to the right. And on the right-hand side, you can see a picture of Kadoja Creek upstream of New York 268 in direct sun. And so this is, again, a location where we saw a significant increase in temperature. Some more results in figure 3 is a graph showing the average temperature of fiber 1 during the entire sampling event with standard deviation. And the highest variation in temperature, as mentioned earlier, is at the gravel deposit downstream of the New York 268 bridge outlet, 430 meters downstream of the DTS box. Some more photos. On the left-hand side of the screen, there are large amounts of sediment and gravel deposits at the outlet, warming the water drastically at the 268 bridge before it reaches the confluence. And on the right-hand side, you have large constriction pool created along the east wing wall of the bridge, creating cold water despite the lack of tree cover. Bridges most certainly do that.
Hey, Steve, I hate to interrupt, but I just want to give you a time check. We want to make sure we have some time for Q&A.
Sure, I'm almost done. Yeah. Okay, so figure 4 shows the average stream peak temperatures at the beginning, middle, and end of sampling. The surface water runoff has high impacts on stream flow temperature, and the temperatures are lower on overcast days as you'd expect and are highly influenced by solar radiation. You can see a rain event in the right-hand picture. So I'm almost at my last slide here. This is the temperature influenced amount by solar radiation surrounding impervious surface, the slope and concentration of pools. So some recommendations would be, a lot of these are obvious, but again, this is, I don't think, quite as interesting as some of our other data will show in other streams. Increase tree cover to reduce solar radiation that reaches the stream, reduce stream side development and remediate existing impervious surfaces, create pools in areas of low concentration and prevent upstream erosion contributing to sediment and gravel deposits. So a very special thanks to our partners, Friends of the Upper Delaware River, Trout Unlimited staff and volunteers, and then the Bureau of Ecosystem Health for Region 4 DEC. And with that, I am finished if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Steve. This is actually my first time seeing some of this as well. So really interesting stuff.
My pleasure.
Just want to say a big thank you for working with us on that. We do have a couple of questions. There's a couple of questions actually about the Mongop and the site on the Mongop. Do you happen to know where that site is?
That is actually one of the few that I didn't have a lot to do with. Our TU folks primarily ran that, and the data is very small on that set. We don't have a lot, unfortunately, on the Mongop. And I have all the data with the intent of looking at it this winter. It's definitely a winter project. I wish I had more to share regarding the Mongop, but I don't. at this time.
Mhm.
One of our technicians that worked for TU, one of our partner technicians, after I trained him up on how to use the system, he was the one that supervised deploying it on the MonGOP. So I don't even have a location on that particular one. So.
Okay, well, we'll be sure and have you back next year. We'll give you more than 10 minutes. So.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, so from here, we are going to move to Caroline Schaefer, who is a New York field technician for Trout Unlimited. Again, we are super excited to work with Trout Unlimited on many of the projects that we work on. And today she's specifically going to talk about the road stream crossing assessment work that we've been doing. So go ahead, Caroline.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, so like Molly said, I'm going to go over the culvert assessment and replacement projects we've been working on. So to start, we've been working with, we're focusing on reconnecting habitat for the community and for the ecosystem. So basically communities, they need safe and resilient road infrastructure, and trout and other organic or aquatic organisms need connected stream to thrive and to complete their life cycle, spawning and such. So basically we're focusing on road stream crossing management and improvement to meet both of these goals. So for culvert prioritization and replacement project, we have the following partners with their roles. So TU basically focuses on the surveys, prioritizing, grant management, designs, and construction. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are there for project design support and permitting. The DEC Region 4, they help with project prioritization and monitoring, permitting, and project implementation support. FUDR, they help us with the grant management, community outreach, and landowner coordination, which is a tough one. Delaware County Soil and Water Conservation District help us with project engineering and design review support. And then the towns we were working with are the town of Colchester, Deposit, and Hancock, as well as the village of Deposit and Hancock. They basically help us with project oversight and coming up with priority culverts. So the project methods, basically we go out and survey, then we come up with a model to digest all the data from the surveys, and then we prioritize and then basically implement. And I'll go into them a little bit more. So first is a survey. We use the NAC assessment, and basically this assessment observes the crossing's road type, flow condition, and crossing alignment, as well as many other parameters. And then it also takes into account the structure's material, inlet and outlet shape, dimensions, and condition. And just like the crossing observations, there's a lot more structure observations. I could go on all day about them. And then basically once the survey's done and you put it into NAC, NAC scores it, and they score it using, they give it a score of full AOP, aquatic organism passage, reduced AOP, no AOP, or like we like to call it, we go a little deeper, severe barrier, significant barrier, insignificant barrier, minor barrier, or no barrier at all. And for these assessments, the equipment that's needed is a stadia rod, measuring tape, a digital level, which usually we use for determining slope of the crossing, safety vests, because sometimes you're on the side of the road, and we use data sheets. NAC also allows you to use an iPad or a smartphone, and you can take that out and do the survey right on that, fill out all the observations due to cost and the concern of electronics near water. We just use data sheets, and then we also have a hard copy if any questions arise. So this is just the results of our Upper Delaware River Barrier Assessment. We surveyed 911 crossings. 59 of those were deemed severe or significant barriers. And these were barriers specifically on trout streams that we looked at. The pie chart up here just kind of breaks it down a little bit more. 19% of those 911 culverts were severe or significant, 7% were moderate, 62% were insignificant or minor, and 12% were no barrier. And also with this map, you can see just how far we went in the Delaware River watershed to assess these culverts. This is just kind of a visual to kind of emphasize how we focus, why focusing on local infrastructure is important. In the Delaware River area, the county only owns about 9% of the total crossings. 18% of the crossings are privately owned, 20% are owned by the state, and 53% are owned by the town. And basically, this is just to show how important it is that we partner with the towns, because they do own, the most crossings. So working with the town can be difficult. The town's reality, they have a lot of road miles to work with. They have a lot of road stream crossings. However, they don't have a lot of budget for these replacements. And with every town, their budget, their ability for maintenance, all that's different. What they can offer for these replacements are all different. But we can help by collecting and basically digesting the data. We sit down and help them identify priority crossings. We develop a road stream crossing plan to help with future planning. And we basically work closely with them to determine how we can help. So, we'll come up with a list of our priority crossings and then ask them what their priority crossings are and basically see where we match. We also help design the structures that are suitable and meet the town's budgets and their resources. And then we go out and help find money to help implement these replacements. So that's that. And this just kind of breaks it down a little bit more when it comes to prioritizing road stream crossings. So basically we look at the freshwater type. So perennial is normally our what we're interested in. Aquatic passage barrier severity, that's where NAC comes in. Quality of habitat and how many miles are connected and will be connected if we were to replace this barrier. We also go into hydraulic capacity, the structure and stream alignment, as well as the structure condition. And then we look at the town. We look at the town and see what we ask them, is there a maintenance issue? Look at the road condition. Is the road failing, which is going to, kind of speed along us replacing the culvert? How old is the structure? And basically, if their budget allows it. This is just showing you how we kind of break everything down and start to pick out our priority culverts. So here you can see we have like different NAC assessments. So basically we'll go in, see which one or which ones are severe or significant, and just kind of, you know, get them all on a map and see where they are. We even go as far as looking into other culverts that are on that stream. I mean, it takes a while to digest all the data and prioritize, and it gets a little messy. So now I'm just going to talk about a few projects we have going on now. This is Fuller Brook. It's a trib to the East Branch of the Delaware. It's in the town of Colchester. It will reconnect about a mile. This is slated for summer of 2022. The funding is coming from Delaware River Conservation Fund and town supported match. And right now, and in previous years, DEC and TU have been monitoring fish passage and will continue to do it after it's been replaced. Another project is Cook Brook. This is a tributary to the Beaver Kill. It's also in the town of Colchester. This will reconnect 3.5 miles. It's also slated for summer of 2022. Funding, Delaware River Conservation Fund and New York State Water Quality Improvement Fund.
Caroline, it's Sherry. I'm just doing a time check. If you could, we have a few questions. I just want to make sure that we can get to them. So,
okay. Hughes Brook, this is a tributary to the Little Delaware River. It's in the town of Delhi. This will reconnect about 2 miles, also slated for summer of 2022. Funding coming from Delaware River Conservation Fund and the New York State Water Quality Improvement Fund. And Webster Brook, tributary to the Little Delaware River, town of Delhi, will reconnect almost 2 miles, slated for summer of 2022, and funding coming from the Delaware River Conservation Fund. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Yeah. We're so excited about this work. It's, you know, like kind of one of the bread and butter pieces of what we do. It makes so much sense because there's so many people that benefit, and the aquatic life really benefits from these projects. And with this kind of analysis as the backbone for our grant application for support for implementing these, you know, we're able to really create strong grant applications. And, you know, I think we have a total of 4 culverts that we're going to be replacing in 2022. And, you know, we're just really excited. These are like big changes that happen when we do this kind of work. So, okay, so we have a question about FEMA money that may be available for road mitigation. Are you familiar with that, Caroline? I might be able to talk to that a little bit if you're not.
I'm the one that's in the stream. I don't.
Yeah, so I can just briefly say that there is some FEMA money available, couple of different kinds of FEMA money available for projects like this, and we are starting to think about it, but it is a complicated process, and I am happy to talk more offline, but I think it's a little too much for the amount of time we have available right now. But it's something that's on our mind. So, do you know, Caroline, if there's similar culvert analysis for rail crossings? I know we're actually going to touch on this a little bit later this morning with Heather from Sullivan County. So we can always just pass this down.
I mean, we assess them if we can get to them. Using NAC, they still show up on NAC.
Sure. Okay.
So,
and I think to answer the second part of that question, I do think that there's value, sometimes great value in doing that. And it's again, something that's on our radar. So, all right, I think we are going to move on. So next up, we have Tom Shepstone from Shepstone Management. And he is going to talk about our UDR Tailwaters rec plan that we are currently working on.
Okay, let's see if I can get our screen up here. Is everybody seeing that now?
I don't see it, no.
Maybe you'll need to play it from that end then. I just shared the screen. It's not coming through.
Okay, hold on just a second. You want to try one more time while I try to pull this up?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, it says it's working now. Yeah, for some reason, yep, that works.
Okay. All right. Hopefully we'll be able to continue making it work here. My pleasure to join you this morning. It's always a pleasure to work with the FoodR staff. We have a great working relationship. They're a real community resource, as this discussion of the culverts showed, and also I think the knotweed discussion. I was privileged to hear both of those and thought they really show the practical side of things, which is so important. I've worked with FoodR in the past on their stream corridor study that I know is on your agenda, that you're going to hear about a little bit later. And also, we worked together on a couple of studies on the fishing industry, the $750 million industry in the Upper Delaware, and has the potential to be $1 billion. So the FoodR was successful in getting some money from the Fish and Wildlife Service, which came down through some other entities, to hire us and to pay for themselves to do a study of the recreational assets in the Upper Delaware Tailwaters region, to develop a plan for that, a cooperative plan that where we work with municipalities, similar to what we heard already with the culverts and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of cooperation going on here, and this is another example of it. We are involved in a number of initiatives to make this work. And if you go to the, are you seeing the next slide? Let's see here. No, this is not working the way it should here. Hold on. Sorry about this. It's supposed to be showing the next slide, but it's not. Well, let me just tell you anyway. The study is designed to essentially, there we go. The study is designed to balance recreation and environmental values in the Upper Delaware Tailwaters region. So we're looking with a view towards tourism development to identify ways to improve river access with an attention to things like the things you've discussed already: wildlife habitat, water quality, flooding, all those sorts of things. Now, you'll also notice in the map to the right, this is an area that includes not only the traditional areas that FoodR has often worked on, with the Stream Corridor Management Plan, for example, which include Colchester, Deposit, and Hancock, but also we're looking at the counterparts on the Pennsylvania side, where I come from, which would be Buckingham, Manchester, and Scott. So we have a little different region than may be typical for FoodR activity, and I think it's a particularly good region. This study, we're going to try to complete it. We will complete it by January 31st of next year. And I believe that it'll provide some very useful data and some very useful recommendations on how we can continue to work together on a number of things of the nature that you've already heard about. The planning partners in this case, of course, include, again, the town officials. We are working with the officials of all 6 of those municipalities. We have a steering committee set up. We've had some meetings directly on the Pennsylvania side with the Council of Governments over there. We're also going to be working with some of the county planning folks. We are with Delaware County already, and we're going to have some Wayne County people attending our next steering committee meeting. We will also involve state agencies. Indeed, we had DEC participate in our last meeting, and we're looking at recreational interest, which includes obviously FoodR itself, but also other groups representing the angler community, the business community, and so on. In fact, we're setting up some focus groups to look at anglers' recreation and business interest. And we want to involve landowners. You can't do this kind of thing without involving landowners. So we've constructed 2 opinion surveys. One is a recreational user survey, and the other is a landowner survey. And you can access those at the website that's indicated in fluorescent green down below. You just go to that page on the FoodR site, and you'll have access to both of those surveys. And we're getting wonderful response, thanks to the good work of the staff there. As of a few minutes ago, we had 95 recreational surveys returned, and we had 52 landowner surveys. So I'd like to get both of those up in the 100 to 200 range, so we have a really good survey of what's going on, because we want to know what people think about the needs for better access are, and what kinds of things would complement the river and complement tourism development, while also improving the quality of the resource itself. So we really need the input of both recreators and landowners to fully appreciate the possibilities and the concerns that might arise from that. So I really want to pump all of you, if you are involved, to complete one of the surveys if it's appropriate to you. If you're a landowner especially, I'd like to get a lot of that input, because that's a little bit behind the recreational, but we're excited about what we're getting so far. So let's continue. The last slide, and I'm going to catch up on time here, folks. So the plan contents. This plan, when it's done in January 31st, will have some background studies on recreational demand. We have a lot of that data already. We'll have a good inventory of recreational assets. As a matter of fact, Wayne County side, they are doing that very thing on the county level. So we'll work that into this study as well. We'll identify recreational opportunities, identification of related needs, such as improvement of the access infrastructure, evaluation of the economic impacts, as we did with the fishing study. We'll relate what we learned from the survey results, what the people really want. And we will be conducting some public meetings, and so we'll provide that input, summarize it so it's easily understood, and we'll make some very concrete recommendations that hopefully the various municipalities and other partners in this project can all get together and help implement in the same fashion that has been done with this culvert thing. I think that's a wonderful model, and we anticipate doing that kind of thing. So that's what we're up to. I'm happy to answer any questions on it, and that's about it from me.
Thank you, Tom. Let's see, I don't think any questions came in on this, but just to echo what Tom's saying, we're actually going to update our website right now, so it's really easy to get to that page too. But please share the survey, take it yourself. If there's anything you can do to help us get the word out, we would greatly appreciate that. So
also, Molly, I just put the link in the chat. People could just click on that and go right to the survey.
Okay, yeah, perfect. If anybody wants to do it at lunch.
Fantastic.
But thank you very much,
thank you all.
Yep, thank you. So up next we have Jim Parham from Tretta Environmental Solutions is going to talk about the high definition stream survey work.
Hello.
Tom, I think you might have to stop sharing your screen. There you go.
I just stopped it for him.
Okay, now Jim, you should be able to
yes,
go right ahead.
I am here and I am going to share my screen directly, and I need to start my video, right?
Yeah, we can see it. So
okay, so
going well so far.
Yay. Okay, so I'll bring it on to full screen here. My name is Jim Parham. I'm with Tretta Environmental Solutions, and we completed a high definition stream survey of the upper Delaware River and two of the creeks this past year. And I'll go into what we have found and what's coming up on the project. This is an example you're seeing of one of the outputs. We're taking, as we travel down the river, we're collecting right, left, forward and underwater video. We're also collecting sonar of various types, and it's all mapped, and we have water quality being collected the whole time. So this is a sort of a continuous survey approach in which we get sort of very nice visual information and then process that information into a sort of a data set that's used for management. And of course, we have to start this off with thanks to all the collaboration, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for providing money. FUDR was the instrumental in this whole process. The Division of Fish and Wildlife from New York and Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission in terms of the fisheries aspect to this, and then Trout Unlimited for the creek work that we did here, and also the national for the section down in the scenic river portion. So what did we do? We completed a survey of 77 miles of the upper Delaware River. So the east and west branches, the main stem down to Callicoon, and the lower ends of Shehawken and Equinunk Creeks. And the intent was to collect the video, sonar, GPS, and water quality information, assess the stream and river corridor conditions to help determine potential restoration opportunities, and estimate trout habitat to sort of fit in with the decision support system that's being used up here. So as an overview, I'll do a brief, what is HDSS as we call it? Why do we even need it? And this, I was not positive. Of course, I hadn't heard all these other presentations I just listened to this morning, but this talk is going to flow beautifully into what you have heard here, in which the ideas and projects that are going on and all these other things will easily work with what you're going to see here and make this project and every other project much better because of it. And it's very nice to see all the really cool projects running, give you some ideas of results and general conclusions. And I will say this, which I'll tell you at the end, this project is slated for, we should have the full reports and everything within a month to you all. So you're not going to see the absolute last stuff because that has to pass through final review here, but it's darn near almost complete. What is HDSS? And it's basically a data collection system where we have video so that we can look at the conditions of the right and left stream bank, the riparian area, infrastructure that we see, front video, so we can talk about habitat type, canopy cover, various things like that, down video, looking at the substrate or embeddedness, side scan sonar, so we know the depth, roughness, hardness, and then we get the beautiful side scan imagery. Water quality is collected at every second so that we have that longitudinal profile. And then everything is linked to GPS so that at every second we know where we are, the time, location, and elevation. How do we collect the data? We can put it on backpacks. This is Shehawken Creek as we walk up a creek, or it can be on boats. This was on the Delaware River. This was on another place, but we can use any kind of small boat. So we're doing this in a lot of small streams and then sort of medium to large size rivers. So why are we doing HDSS, or what is the actual need for this? I worked in the fisheries world for quite a few years now, and Kurt Fausch here published in Bioscience, almost 20 years ago, one of the problems we have in fisheries and in a lot of water management, we typically go out and do sampling at a specific location. We drag a transect across a stream, or we sample very specific locations. That information is critically important, but it doesn't tell us everything we need to know about the stream. So then the advent of aerial imagery came in, and we started doing some really fantastic landscape level analyses. And so these two levels have been really well handled by our sort of current sampling. But what's happening at this middle level, what's happening when we look at things in a continuous way over many miles of stream has been very difficult up till now. And this is the area, all kinds of critical events. The animals move up and downstream, outfalls affect things way upstream, and water flows downstream. So how does this all fit together in this sort of intermediate scale is the area we've been working on now for the last almost 10 years on trying to come up with a good method to do this. And here's an example of the big picture, landscape versus the riverscape. This is an excellent U.S. Fish and Wildlife product looking at the upper Delaware we're looking at the Delaware River Basin. And you can see in this case, was looking at the index of ecological impact from good to bad, sort of, and you can see areas where you would have less or more impact. And this basin scale modeling is critical to overall planning and management and collaboration, and it's excellent for landscape representation. And we've been involved in many projects like this. Great for understanding overland and groundwater flow, but for understanding streams and rivers, we really need to get on the water. And that's where the high definition stream survey comes in. This is a shot on the East Branch. And you can just basically, again, I'll just show you, you're looking at both banks. This is side scan sonar, so you're able to see from bank to bank the conditions and the substrate. Here's an underwater video, so they can do confirmation on that. This is water depth and the second echo here, which helps you determine the hardness of the bottom. And then everything's mapped, so we know where it is, the time and date, and all the information is available for you. And why do I say that we need to see it from a stream when on the main Delaware River we can see some of this information from the air? Well, here's Shahawken Creek, where we came in and we did habitat surveys and fish surveys, and this is lower Shahawken. And if we use aerial imagery, we can zoom into aerial imagery. I mean, you can see the branches and leaves in the trees, but we really can't tell very much about the stream and what the conditions are, habitat type, all of that kind of information. So this is that exact same area. As we're walking up the stream, we're able to estimate depth with our marked walking sticks, but you can see the conditions on both banks. You'll be able to see whether or not you're in a shallow run or you're coming up on a riffle. It's very easy to see what's going on. So we're able to look at substrate, habitat type, water depth, all of the sort of typical parameters that we will want to know. And we can see that in a continuous fashion. The other thing that's really good about it is it allows anyone to see this information. It's not like we create a data set where people have to come back and say, this is what the conditions are. And you guys can actually see what it looks like in Shahawken Creek. So when we say there's a problem or there's not a problem, it can be easily verified, and it's not the case of, for example, a consultant coming in and providing data that is non-verifiable. Oops, we can move to the next slide here. At the same time in the creeks, we completed high definition fish surveys, which are very similar to sort of the above water habitat assessment. This one uses GPS referenced underwater video, where we go along through the streams with a long pole and a camera on it, and it's almost video fishing. You're just placing it in all the locations. We know the condition of this habitat, what it looks like, because we have the above water surveys, and now we can count all the animals underneath the water. This is an example from Shahawken Creek, from a little tiny side pool, maybe a mile up the stream, and there's a lot of neat fish in here. All kinds of suckers and shiners and brook trout, and there's largemouth bass and all kinds of things. It's documented to when, where, and what was observed. So this information can be linked with what the information that the state is collecting from their electroshocking surveys to verify the location and information that we're seeing. As I said, we have different methods to collect this information. You know, we go on a boat or we go on a backpack, and when we're on the larger rivers, we use sort of a double pass, 2 boats going down the stream. And here's an example of that. This is Hancock here. So this is the East Branch coming in, the West Branch, and then the confluence going down to the main stem. And the 2 different colors are the boat on the left side and 1 boat on the right side. These little sections here are cross sections. So within each mile, we stop and cross the stream, getting a channel capacity or transect profile. So not only do we have longitudinal profiles being collected, the cross-sectional profiles are collected through the whole system. And I'm going to zoom in on this to show a little more of what's happening. As we go in, we can see this left and right track much more clearly. And zooming in a little more, we can see each second of the survey. And so we have information now being collected at that scale for each of these dots as we move down the river for both banks of the river, or for both tracks of the river. And this is great because you can go to any spot along here, look at the video, look at the data associated with it, which I'll show you here in a moment. But we also need to be able to sort of put this in context of the stream as a whole, or the river as a whole. So all of this information is linked to the National Hydrography Dataset line file, which is basically a line that you would use to characterize where you are in the rivers that the federal system and many collaborators already use. So here would be that line coming up. These are our points from both tracks. And so while we have the information for each track, it's also associated with a center line. So we can look at the information from what's happening on this bank all across the river and everything associated with a single line. So from a technical standpoint, it makes it very easy now to take this complicated data from video sources and everything else and put it in a single sort of simple data set that allows integration with other projects. So what do I mean by we take this video data and classify it into other information? This is an example of the classification software where we have all kinds of different classes that we can do. And as the video is being watched, so much of this is done by what's called supervised or heads up classification, where we actually watch the video and make classifications about what we see. What are the conditions of the bank? What are the conditions of the stream bed? Do we see a riffle runner pool? What do we see in the picture? There are many different classifications that can be done, and that can be easily set up and defined by the needs of the project. So all the information comes through. We can see places where maybe we have to get out of the boat and drag through shallow water, or here's where a cross section is, and then the condition as it goes down. What is this used for? And I'll give you an example. This is a sort of standard stream corridor assessment that we do. This is for impact assessment and project prioritization. We look at the riparian zone. That's the sort of the area within about 100 meters of the bank. The stream bank, the actual slope side of each of the banks, and the stream bed. So we end up with a classification that has all of these broken into 5 parts, and then any discrete features that we see, meaning things like outfalls, bridges, road crossings, anything like that that we observe. And here's an example from the East Branch. These 5 lines are these 5 lines I was talking about here. So we have the outer lines would be the riparian zones, the inside would be the right and left stream bank, and then the condition of the stream bed. This is a continuous data set that's been sort of classified with a consistent methodology. So we're able to look at the whole system using sort of the same metrics for these different things. And as sort of most of you know, the Upper Delaware River is a beautiful river, and it's in very good shape in comparison to many rivers throughout the country. But it has issues on it, and that's a lot of what we've been talking, or you all have been talking about today, in the sense of where are these problems and what might they be. And we see in the middle of this picture this weird little red spot when everything else is basically green or yellow, which green is good and red is bad in this scale. What's happening here? This sort of comes back to the beauty of having this all collected, is we can zoom in and say, why did this segment here end up being scored poorly for the stream bed? Here's the video associated with it. I'll play it. And this is actually me in the boat coming down right here. We can see a section of some knotweed, some old bridge pilings here. And I'm going to come around the corner, and we can start to see a line on the surface right in about here. The water is pretty clear down here, but as we see this line on the surface, it's going to change water clarity dramatically. You can see we're going right into sort of a high sediment area. Then we're going to move around. I'm going to come right up into the little bay here. And we're getting lots of sediment coming into the stream here. We actually can look at the depths and conditions and all that stuff. I'll go just a little bit farther and stop the video, but it does show what the condition of the stream bed is and why. And in this case, the stream banks and the riparian zone are not being scored in abnormally poor condition. It's just the bed of the river. And I come up about this far, you can see how shallow it's getting. Actually get stuck right here. And when I put my paddles in the water, it's pulling up giant clouds of mud. So, okay, we're easily able to see what this issue is. Obviously, you all are going to want to know, well, what is this associated with? Let's go to the next slide. This is the track coming right down here. This is the section you just saw as I came around the point up to here, got stuck and then back down the stream. And this is runoff from, rock processing. Now, the question then becomes, is this an issue? Is there a better way to deal with it? Could you put in some sediment detention ponds or clean out sediment detention ponds that are sitting right here so that this runoff decreases? The overall approach is to have a comparatively weighted system so that any of these issues throughout your system are prioritized against each other. So you can see the worst places or the best places. The data set of this allows you to look at areas to protect, areas that are in good condition, or areas that need work, which are the ones in poor condition. When we talk about HDSS, we're talking right now about stream corridor assessment. And stream corridor assessment is extremely important. It covers a lot of what we deal with in municipal stormwater permitting or overall general management of rivers. But there's a lot of other things going on in rivers. We have infrastructure. So what is it that the Department of Transportation, for example, all their bridges, what do they deal with? So stormwater, Department of Transportation, water quantity and water quality. And these typically are dealing with hydropower issues, as is the case. And this is not a shot from the upper Delaware. This is actually a Tennessee shot under another hydropower system where we need to know the channel capacity that goes into flood risk and drought impact models and in-stream flow. We need to know the quality so that drinking water can be protected, the quality for trout habitat, all of these kind of pieces. And then we move over to habitat for species. And that allows us to then integrate with what the state or other organizations are doing with multiple different kinds of habitat. And extending from habitat, we have things like outreach. How do you get this information out to the public? And all of these things sort of spin around. And the goal, I come from a fisheries background, but unfortunately, we have not really been that successful in fisheries in most places in the country. And one of the reasons is we consider fisheries to be an independent piece of this whole puzzle. A number of these projects that I've heard about today is beginning to move away from that, where we're seeing things like the corridor assessment, or in terms of the culvert assessment, and that starts to look at both the human use of the infrastructure and the habitat for the animals. So as these projects start to integrate together, you have a data set that flows into many different pieces. So we're no longer separating out what's good for the fish independent of what's good for humans, or what's good for hydropower is now integrated in what's good for all these other pieces. So the data collection is intentionally designed to collect information to allow us to model all of these different pieces. So we are currently mapping the trout habitat on this project. We sort of met with the state last month, and I'll be very brief. In fact, this is about all I'll talk about on the trout habitat side of it, because it's kind of a whole nother piece of the puzzle in a sense. But this information, we can look at the water depth, the habitat type, roughness and substrate type, relative velocity, in-stream cover, since we have large woody debris, vegetation, channel complexity, the water quality, temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, specific conductivity, and suspended solids, the bed slope and channel capacity, the bank and bed conditions, as I was talking about. But we also now have it in a spatial measure. How far are these habitats from deep water? What is the habitat variety? And then can blend that with the fishing regulations and the sort of the distance from access, all of those kind of pieces in terms of recreational use or a number of these other type projects. So this part is in full blast, and it should be very done maybe within the next week or so as this whole project closes up in the next month. But I won't talk too much about it because it requires like a whole complete presentation in itself, and the final parts of this one aren't done. Okay, so then we also have questions of outreach. As part of this project, we went through and looked at how is the upper Delaware River broken down. And so all of the access points, the ones in blue, all of the different naming conventions for what these places are called, and the river miles were set up for sort of a map atlas approach, so that the map atlas could come through here. You can open up any page of the thing, look at the location of concern, and find out where it is, what it's called, all of this kind of information. And from that, this is all linked to the data and video, allowing you to figure out what that information is associated with areas of concern. Because one of the things we've seen in past projects is the way people address rivers or streams locally is completely different than we address them in terms of a spatial modeling perspective. So we would talk about this thing in kilometers and meters, and most people don't look at streams and rivers this way. So now we can come in and look at the conditions from this pool down to through this band. If that was a concern, we can come in and get the data set for that area. So from an outreach perspective, all of the information that you all would use as a local perspective is also integrated with the sort of the overall video and data. And I'm going to sort of continue and close with a situation that summarizes what the overall intent of the HTSS is and how we hoped this project would be used. And it's a great example of what could be done. This is, I guess I learned today, it should just be the knotweed distribution because not all Japanese knotweed, but we looked at, given that knotweed is a concern on the upper Delaware River, which it's not a concern on most rivers that we've surveyed. In fact, I had never seen it before this survey. We're able to come down the river and easily quantify what is knotweed, and what isn't. The yellow in this case is knotweed on both the left or right bank. This little red dot is going to be a current location when I flip to the next screen, which shows the video. I wanted to show the data so that you have some idea of what's happening. Here's the date, time in Eastern. So we're looking at basically 11:15 in the morning. This is track 411. That's what we're going to see in the next video. And I want to show you this. This is the knotweed code for the left and for the right. And okay, so we have knotweed on the left and not on the right at this location, and it's telling us there's on the left but not on the right. So every second as this little point moves downstream, knotweed has been classified, the presence of it on the banks of the river. Again, this was not an intended project when this effort started, but it is such sort of an easy output from this type of work that we did this to kind of highlight how this information could be used to answer local questions in a locally specific way. So here's that exact location coming underneath the bridge. And we have knotweed. We happen to, this is fortuitous, I guess, in a sense. Knotweed was in full bloom when we were there. It's very easy to identify on the videos. Knotweed is very beautiful at this time of year. It may not be the greatest ecological thing, but it's very easy to see when it's in full bloom. And here on the right bank, we're not seeing knotweed. And as we move down the river, we can go ahead, we'll basically be seeing knotweed going all the way down this left bank in just tiny spots here. We also see things like large woody debris laying in the water. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, you could see it right here. I happen to have people's faces over that section of my screen, but I do know you can see a tree underwater, and that's, or half underwater, that's this piece of large woody debris. So the video coming out of the side scan sonar allows us to identify trees underwater and everything. So we can get all that information just sort of as an aside. But here's the knotweed coming down this whole section. So on to my next slide. This is the upper Delaware as we surveyed it. Now we have the East Branch, the West Branch, and the main Delaware basically from Hancock down to Calhoun, and each left and right side. So the overall segment length, for example, from Hancock down to Calhoun is 45 kilometers. Of that, 23 or almost 24 kilometers of the left bank are covered in knotweed, and 21.5 kilometers for the right bank. So we have some percentages here. Here's the east and west. I will say, and after the state folks saw this, they had commented, this is somewhat an artifact, what you're seeing here, of how far we're spun out, because these points are overriding themselves and you don't see what's in between them. So it looks worse than it is here. But overall, we're looking at around 44% of both stream banks covered in the upper Delaware system with knotweed. So I heard the presentation here earlier looking at specific locations. This is just talking about knotweed basically growing on the banks of the river. So this is another approach to look at what the condition of knotweed is in the system. And I wanted to make sure I left some time for questions. In conclusion, we expect this full project to be delivered within the month. All video and data basic on that side has been completed. The mapping of the stream corridor is completed. And the knotweed. We're doing the trout habitat maps right now. The maps for all of the access points and all that stuff has already been done. The report is about 90% complete. And while I didn't cover much on the creeks today, the information for both the main river and Shahawken and Equinunk Creeks are included in the reports, and then will be separated to the various funding agencies. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. We always appreciate seeing an update on what you're up to. So much good information here. A few questions did come in through the presentation. The first one says, a lot of information is gathered. How is it being used? For example, the USGS habitat model is now 15 years out of date, and its flow/habitat curves have been criticized. Is this data to be used to update that or improve that model? And is it right for that purpose?
So I guess so there's always two answers. There's sort of a political answer, and then there's sort of a reality answer. The information in the decision support is, from what I've heard, being updated now. The curves and the inputs to the habitat suitability curves are being looked at. So what we have here is a system in which those curves can be applied. Not exactly, because the data wasn't collected exactly the same way as Ken Bovia and those guys did that back in 2007. So it's not that the data was collected exactly the same, but the concept is very similar. So we can end up looking at this whole idea as a river wide. We can look at those segments that were defined in the decision support, and do they accurately represent the river as a whole? So yes, it can be used with the decision support system. No, as this current project sits, that's not part of the deliverable to integrate all of this into the decision support. That sort of will be hopefully an outgrowth of all the data available. So as the decision support system updates are happening, the new information can be added in and looked at some of these more specific questions. So,
and I just want to add to the, Peter, very early on in this process, we had meetings with the DRBC, with Jake and I can't remember the other guy's name, but you know, to get an understanding of what it is that they were looking for as they were doing their work. So it's something that's been in our mind from the beginning of this project. So let's see, next we have, oh, what happened here? Can you share the info again on the McGarrigle et al. Paper?
Sure. I think my screen, or did my screen not sharing at the moment? Or
it's not sharing at the moment, no.
Okay.
Maybe you could just drop it in the chat box when we get off of here.
Oh, sure.
That works. Okay.
Yeah.
At what point will this information become accessible either through FUDR, TU, or TREDA? Will maps be available to review to help us focus possible mitigation plans?
Yeah, so we expect that basically by the end of next month, the latest. So all this information is sort of in final draft format. A little bit of work is still happening on the trout model part, and then it'll all be delivered for review for FUDR and other partners, and then the final will be released basically. How the information goes from our delivery to the funding agencies, and then what happens to it after there isn't sort of in our control. We will provide all the data, all the video, all the maps, all of the reports, everything will be publicly available through these sources. How it's used, because it is also massive gigabytes of information when you're talking about many hours worth of video of both two different tracks of river. You know, this is many gigabytes of high definition video. We have to have a sort of a mechanism to distribute that. We have talked with FUDR on how this has happened. We do have some open source GIS software that may allow this to be done for a very low cost or free potentially to get the video available through the web to everyone. But that's sort of a step beyond what the deliverables for this project are, but an obvious question. And so we're working on that and hoping we can sort of deliver an app soon after this that would allow this all to happen for sort of very cheap or free to get this information out, to allow many people to use it for their separate goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think FUDR is interested in actually keeping kind of a simplified version of this on our website, so it's very easy for people to find, you know, and we're gonna work toward that direction. So it might be a few months after the report that's delivered when we are able to get that posted, but that's the end goal. And
to say that all the information is already in a GIS format. So it is very easy to put the maps and all of this stuff online. The video is the question, and a lot of people do want to be able to view the video. So that just takes more resources because of its size.
Right. So the last question we have is, will the final report be strictly data and factual scientific findings? Will it also include concerns and recommended action items to address those concerns?
So yes, it will include concerns. The stream corridor assessment, in an attempt to be brief and sort of cover the scope of everything that's going on, I didn't delve into the details of it, but it does rank everything in here. So everything ends up being ranked in terms of its condition, and therefore a very simple question is, what are the worst ranked places? So what are the top 20 worst things that you saw is a is an output that every single organization wants. I mean, that's what everybody always wants. Where do we do the work? So that will be summarized so that you can look at those specific locations, and it shows what the what's the problem and what are the potential remediation actions or conservation actions. So that setup is within the sort of design of the output of the product. Now that could be expanded to the top 300 or 3,000. It's really a database type project, but the top 20 locations will be provided.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you again. We really appreciate that.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yep. So I just want to briefly mention that in addition to the, I guess it's six projects that we heard about this morning, we have about 15 other funded projects ongoing in the region. And a lot of the on the ground stuff has been slowed down by about a year due to COVID. And so we are working through all of that, but we anticipate that we might install as many as 4 culverts and complete 5 other stream restoration projects next year. That would be our goal. And we just, as kind of a wrap up to this session, wanted to check in with a couple of our municipal partners who are really kind of essential to getting this work done, because as I mentioned earlier, there's a very significant match component, and they're often able to work with us, towards mutually beneficial goals and provide a lot of, or all of that match support. So Jeff, is Pat there?
Hi, Molly. Yep, Pat is here, and he's going to sit in my seat. So my name will be up there, but it will be a younger, more handsome man than I.
Perfect. And also, is Brian Moore on? I'm not sure that I've seen him. Well, we can start with Pat. Pat is from the town of Hancock, who we work with very regularly. So.
Hello, everybody. As you've already been informed, this is not Jeff Skelding, not even close. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the coalition, the partnerships, and what they mean to the community of Hancock, in my point of view. I've been involved with the community for a very long time, actually dating back to before the time the sewage treatment plant was built by the village. And the biggest problem going forward from that point was for these municipalities in the tailwaters below the dams to secure funding for things they needed to do. And these things kind of came to a head when the weather changed and the flooding began, which goes back to just before and during my time as a highway superintendent here in Hancock. What this coalition has really brought about, and I kind of think back in my own mind, I did not saying who thought it all up or where it all came from, but when former supervisor in Hancock, Sam Rowe, and Jeff Skelding got together and realized that the things that they both wanted would be accomplished by the same type of work. And then later on, by the efforts of Dean Frazier from the county, and we sort of put this whole thing together. I actually started as a village representative in the coalition and then moved on to the town. What we're coming up with is that the local municipalities and the nonprofit, the non-government organizations working together add strength and numbers, efforts to reach more advocates to protect the community and the river and the river's watershed. And that's important too. This coalition has brought the tailwater communities to the attention of the state and the federal government way more than those of us in municipal government could have done, and has helped us secure more funding. As small communities, and even though Hancock is very large in area, I would say off the top of my head, the population adding the village and the town is somewhere around 4,000 people, permanent residents. It's difficult, if not impossible, to secure the funding needed, the resources needed just by the municipalities. But the coalition provides a forum to exchange view and find the funds for those projects. Another thing the coalition provides for the municipalities is there are some projects that are beneficial to landowners and further down the road to infrastructure, but they're not on public property or not directly impacting municipal infrastructure at the time. So the municipalities and the county, our hands are kind of tied. We can't really go there and spend local taxpayer money on some other person's property so much. But when you factor in what outfits like UDR and Trout Unlimited can do, we get a lot more assistance in that area, and that helps us with problems down the road. So that's kind of the gist of the thing for me. I've seen it evolve from way before most of y'all got here. And I think it's a good thing. I think without it, we'd be in a lot more trouble, and I hope it continues for a long time. Anybody have anything they want to ask or?
I just will echo, a huge thank you. You've been a great partner, and, we look forward to continuing to work with you and our other local municipal leaders. So thank you.
Yeah, pleasure's mine to be involved, and I'm glad that everybody is moving in the right direction. It really makes things work a lot easier. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
So that is actually a nice little transition over into the next segment of this, which is about our stream corridor management planning work and a little glimpse into some of the work going on in Sullivan County, specifically on the O&W Rail Trail, the Sullivan O&W Rail Trail. So for this segment, we have two different speakers. We have Shelley Johnson Bennett, who's the director of the Delaware County Department of Planning and Watershed Affairs. She's going to give us an update on our stream corridor management planning efforts that are going on in Delaware County. And those have recently wrapped up. So looking forward to hear a little bit about that and sharing that with everyone. And then on the other side of the spectrum here, we're about to kick off some really new exciting work in Sullivan County. And Heather Jaxie, who's a senior planner at the Sullivan County Division of Planning, Community Development, and Real Property, is going to talk to us about that. So I am going to hand it over to you, Shelley, to get this started. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So there are a lot of familiar names and faces on this call, which is nice. That means you've been here to hear our story about stream corridor management planning throughout the time at WWE. We've been talking about this for a few years. We started with a grant to do phase one. And in phase one, we sort of identified what the area of study would be. We identified a lot of the problems that the communities were having. There were a lot of public meetings, meeting with the communities, identifying their concerns, identifying issues surrounding habitat protection, as well as flood mitigation, as well as looking at the history of the streams and how they've evolved, how climate change has impacted them, how the communities themselves have been addressing them. And we came up with a number of goals and objectives that we wanted to put forth that would allow for the communities to begin to look at specific projects, which we knew would require additional engineering or additional work. But it was more of a generalized, these are the best management practices we want to follow. These are the areas that are of importance to us, whether it was because it's affecting a population center or it's an important stream for fish migration, for for habitat protection. Knotweed, of course, was certainly an issue, as well as other invasive species. So all of that was in phase 1. We then were able to secure funding to do phase 2. And phase 2, we're just wrapping up. So with phase 2, what we ended up doing is we identified the streams by actually walking the miles of stream within the study area. So we hired interns. We were trained through the Soil and Water Conservation District of things that should be identified. So whether it was a slope failure, it's a culvert crossing, or it's a large swatch of invasive species, or a revetment, or areas that needed pebble counts to see how they're moving. Our interns actually did that over the course of 2 summers. Then our GIS staff took and created map books for each one of the 24 subbasins. So the subbasins surround a stream and its tributaries. So those map books basically created the baseline. So just a snapshot in time of this is the condition of the stream. These are where the conditions have problems. And on those maps, they actually identify all of those things that the interns found in the stream basins themselves. That creates that position that we now know what the stream condition is. So any changes made, whether a town replaces a culvert or there is a stream restoration project that is done, we can update those maps over time, but we also can see how the streams are migrating and how they're moving and how slope failures may be continuing, or where a perched culvert may become more perched. Because we've created that baseline, we now know the time frame in which things will be changing, and that will over time help us prioritize even different projects, because we'll know how quickly the stream is actually changing or moving or migrating, so that it allows us to create that scientific basis to justify dollars going into these projects. Then the written text of the phase 2 is actually just identifies each of the subbasins and gives some basic information about the hydrology, information about the types of soils that are there, the populations that surround it, if there are any. Land uses are identified in that section. All of that has then put together to complement the phase 1 so that the two can work hand in hand. We've finished up those documents. They are available on our webpage. I'm not sure, Molly, if they ever got put on the FoodR webpage. If not, we can certainly get them to you to put up so that we can make them then available to the public. So at this point, we're really waiting for closeout from the final funding agency, which was the Appalachian Regional Commission for this part of the project. And then we'll be able to actually make them live public documents for anyone to use for projects moving forward or for information purposes. That's really where we're at with the SCMP. Now we're looking to implement, which is the next really exciting phase, is to actually implement some of the concepts and ideas that we developed.
Okay, thank you so much, Shelley, for the update. And yeah, if you want to send those over, we'd be happy to find a place for them on our website.
Perfect.
So, all right, Heather, are you all set? Take it from here. Heather? We can see. Oh, there you are. Okay, great.
I'm on 2 devices because my computer does not have a microphone. So I feel like we're going back in time with my presentation. Why is it not? There we go. So I'm Heather Jackson, and I work for Sullivan County Planning, and that's Sullivan County, New York. The last time I was at WWE, I found out there was one in Pennsylvania too. So anyway, I'm pleased to let you guys know that we're gonna launch a Neversink Watershed Management Plan effort and a pilot project. And we got some funding through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, their Delaware Watershed Conservation Fund. And our team looks like this. The money will be coming through Sullivan County, but basically we're just going to be helping out the town of Fallsburg, Footer, and Trout Unlimited do this work. So I feel that we're really lucky to have these people as partners, we're really just facilitators in this. So we got $500,000 to do a plan and a pilot project. And I kind of want to give you a sense of how far we're turning the clock back. This is what the majority of the plans in our office look like. And to emphasize the point, these are some of the illustrations. So there are 8 sub-watersheds in the Neversink watershed. We'll be looking at 6 of them, 2 of them being in Ulster County and have been looked at a little bit more closely already. The 6 we'll be looking at are mostly in Sullivan County and in Deer Park, which is in Orange County. So for the planning process, I kind of feel like Shelley did a really great job of summarizing what we hope to do and in the project that they finished. You know, we want to create a blueprint for future waterway protection and restoration. We'll be doing about 4 miles of stream inventory. We really do want to follow the Tailwaters model with community engagement. And we want to work with the DPWs and the town highways because we know that they need a lot of help. And that one graph that we showed that over 50% of crossings in Delaware County were owned by the towns. I imagine that it's the same here. And we really want to include citizens and we want to make it fun and informative. So we hope to set goals and objectives to restore, protect, and enhance local water resources, planning to protect high quality water resources, developing open space conservation plans. The last time we did an open space plan was 2006, and it was really more land-based. You know, our water sections included sections on consumption and flood management, and didn't really go into the streams and discuss habitat a whole lot. So that would be great to augment that. Establish local stewardship and education programs, and identify site-specific restoration and enhancement projects, which sort of brings us to the pilot project, which is around the Sullivan O&W Rail Trail. Currently, our trail consists of 25 miles of little sections. Those sections you can see in blue. The orange sections are sections that we need to purchase still and complete. And at the end of the day, we hope to have 50 miles with a 10-mile spur. It will one day connect to the Empire State Trail, which is a project of New York State to connect New York City to Albany, and then cross to Buffalo and up through to Canada. So it's really quite an effort, and you know, be a really great system at the end of the day. And you guys probably know this, but rail trails are really great for residents' health, for green transportation. That increases property values and quality of life, all sorts of things. So what could be more environmentally friendly? Well, we kind of forget about its industrial past, and we also forget about when it was created. You know, look at how long ago this infrastructure was put in. So you can see that a lot of it is land berm and rock cut through, and along with that, you get, you know, a lot of erosion as the streams have been altered. We more rain and all the things that you guys have been talking about. You know, we have a lot of drainage issues and washouts. So our pilot project is to look at part of our trail that's already in place, and you can go out and take a hike on it now. It's just at the edge of the village of Woodridge, and it goes towards the Neversink River. We're going to look at some of the crossings here. And we're really going to try and figure out a better strategy for you know, making this what seems like green infrastructure greener and better for aquatic passage. So you can see the stream trying to shove itself through 2 very tiny culverts, and a washout here, and just a slapdash repair. But it's a really beautiful trail, and we encourage you to get out on it and to take a look at it, and that these resources are really important for our residents and our visitors and our economy. And we, I'm doing a shameless plug here to have you guys all come out and join us in Liberty in February for the Snow and W, which will be a snowshoe fun run. And if you follow us on Instagram at Sullivan_ONW_rail_trail, you can keep up with all of our events. But we really hope that the integration of these two things, the aquatic passage, you know, how we're looking at our streams differently, and how we're building up our infrastructure, and will really be a great fit.
Okay, thank you so much, Heather. Heather and I actually just walked a few miles of this trail the other day for me to start to get my bearings down here, and I can also attest to the fact that it's just gorgeous down there, and you know, certainly worth a visit by anyone who might be interested. And you know, what a great resource to potentially have 50 miles of that to be able to move around. So
right.
It does not look like any questions came in for Shelley or Heather. So if that's the case, we can probably break a bit early for lunch, unless there's any other comments or questions for any of the presenters that we've had this morning. So hearing none, I'm adjourning us for lunch. We're gonna again leave the Zoom on. So just mute yourself and turn off your camera, and we will reconvene. Is it at 1? Someone have that full schedule up in front of them. Is it 1? Shell, Sherry, anybody?
It is 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Okay, perfect.
No, wait. Sorry. It's 12:30.
Oh, 12:30. Okay.
Yes.
So look at that. You're getting almost an hour for lunch. So, okay. Well, thank you again.